So thank you very much for that wonderful introduction, and I'm so happy to be here, and I'm especially thankful to Rick for having this conversation, and we had a really great lunch today going over what we're going to talk about, so I hope we didn't lose our mojo, but I thought we would start with just to refresh our memories, a short clip from Slacker, and it sort of will set the tone for what I'm thinking about how this connects to my show next door.
Hey, got a cigarette? The light?
Project we're working on.
Sure.
So, did you vote in the most recent election?
Hell no. We got less important things to do.
What do you do to earn a living?
You mean work? To hell with the kind of work you have to do to earn a living. All it does is fill the bellies of the pigs who exploit us. Hey, look at me, I'm making it. I may live badly, but at least I don't have to work to do it.
What would it take for you to get a job?
Hey, I'll get a job when I hear the true call.
What's the true call?
You know, the true call. I know when I hear it.
Anything else you want to know?
Yeah, there's something else. To all you workers out there, every single commodity you produce is a piece of your own death.
What was your relationship like with your...
End of interview.
Thanks.
So
It is a comedy, please laugh. Dark and edged comedy, but yeah, comedy nonetheless.
I thought an appropriate way to start would be my Slacker approach is to go to Wikipedia and get the true definition of a Slacker, or what they the official one, and it was. So they say the term slacker.
I never heard this.
The term slacker is used to refer to a person who habitually avoids work. That's pretty accurate.
Yeah.
Slackers may be regarded as belonging to an anti-materialistic counterculture. I think that's true.
Yeah.
And though in some cases their behavior may be due to apathy or laziness. I'm not sure about that.
Arguable, yeah.
Yeah. So there's another scene in the film
That's
where
some judgment, yeah.
Yeah, where somebody says, withdrawing in disgust is not the same thing as apathy. And I think that's sort of like the crux of thinking behind it. But just to give a little more background, what the character in Slacker was saying was sort of taking a political position, sort of this self-determined refusal of being part of like the workaday workforce, or
He sort of delivers a manifesto there in his own way.
Yeah, exactly. And so like I thought, okay, let me like research a little more like this whole notion of like the slacker and where it comes from, and it's it actually originated back in like the 1790s and then came into prominence in the mid 20th century.
Yeah, early.
Yeah, like back.
World War I era.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And it was related to like the British colonialism in Sudan, and they had enslaved these African workers to help them produce like stuff for their war effort. And so the people who were like lethargic, they called it lethargic workers.
Yeah.
They were called slackers.
Lethargic, yeah.
Yeah, so that's one thing, and then it, of course, got rolled into like draft dodgers. That was another kind of slacker. And then there's all these other historical precedents to like our Austin slacker, and there's of course the Italian autonomists who were the ones who self-regulated what they wanted to do. So they said, okay, I'll work, but I'll only work for this time to this time, or I have to leave for soccer games and things like that. So that was one type. And there's Charlie Chaplin. Which is great.
He saw the future.
Yeah, exactly. And there's like anarchists who kind of fit in that idea too, and I think
Yeah.
in Slacker you kind of touch on that. Yeah, Emma Gold,
Emma Goldman.
Goldman. Maybe it's upside down.
Sorry. I wasn't saying anything interesting. You're not missing much.
Well, so I'm getting to a point here. So there's, Bartleby, who said he would prefer not to.
Classic.
And then here's Lafargue's The Right to Be Lazy. And this is where I start to think more
Right.
about the creative thinker needs time to idle. This notion of
Yeah.
the idling.
My prototypical American slacker would be probably like Henry David Thoreau. A naturalist who, if you've read Walden lately, I hope you have. It's not just something you should read in high school. It's incredible. But he has seen the future. He's seen the industrial age coming. All these poor guys who they have gardens and they work and they sell and they do all this just so they can have a house and a horse and a carriage, all the little things. And this is so, 1840s, whatever.
Yeah.
And he goes, you know what? I want to just live my life. I want to, he was a naturalist. He really, he was a writer more than anything. He spent all his time writing. And it was, had his ambitions there. And he just figured it out very logically. Just like, wow, I don't want to do all that just so I can have this. And so that's been going on forever, but it takes a real conscious effort in whatever culture. I think I go back 160 something years just to show that there's nothing really new. The beatniks, hippies to some degree, they get these labels. And when Slacker came out in the early 90s, it was like, it's the same criticism over and over, apathetic, lazy, these bad judgments. But for the people within that subculture, I've always been interested in subcultures and dropouts. And because I know, once you're a member of that, whenever you're trying to do something different in the world, define yourself or, outside the consumer, ideology, you have to find it on your own.
Yeah.
So I think that's important for the dropout. But it's not about apathy and laziness. It's just not buying into the current status quo, whatever that is.
Right. It's making
300 years ago, it was like
choice.
work for the British Empire
Right.
and produce this so they can expand their empire. There's always going to be people like, screw that.
Yeah.
I want to live. I have a life that's outside of being just a worker, or how you're defined by your utilitarian purpose, by whether it's the corporation, the state, or your own parents, whoever is oppressing you, or leading you in a path that your spirit doesn't want to go. If you look through history, most people were enslaved to some degree at birth. If you go back 1,000 years, 2,000 years, you were working for the king, the monarchy. Somebody kind of had control of your time. If you're clever enough, you can find that little place in the margins. That I identified that early. I was a teenager. I was like, you can live there, and it can be pretty fun. You can create your own space, but it's a real conscious effort.
Yeah, it's making a choice to not.
Yeah, you have to give up a lot.
Yeah, but you're gaining a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
That's the sole purpose, of course, is to explore who you are, and find out. I remember there was a time when I just I don't know much. I want to just read for 3 years straight. The classics and study things I'm interested in. And it was great to, once you're no longer a student or you're employed or, you can, if you can work your life around it and use your time wisely, it's amazing how much time really is in a day. If it's yours.
If you don't have to.
If you're on your own schedule.
Yeah.
If you can work your life like that, that's a challenge in itself. And you can find these pockets to explore.
Yeah, I'm interested in that, in relation to what the show I'm doing, because, as Alex had mentioned in the intro, I've often included all these other elements in the show, performance or some kind of music thing or video or filmmaking as performance kind of things to sort of really use the space in a different kind of way. And for the university project, I really was like, I wanted to sort of vacate that element, and so that it really became this space of like emptiness and almost a little semi-forlorn of space where like, hey, what's that supposed to be in there? You know, like, so that there's like pockets and areas where you literally take a detour, you know, like through the space, and it's like the classroom at the university where nobody showed up to class. Like,
I encourage all of you to see the show if you haven't already, and go in some off hour where you're kind of alone in there too. That's good too. I mean, it's always good, you know, the community, but if you can, like I saw it today in some off hour, and it was that, you know.
I'm interested specifically in like that also political position of like saying no, you know, just say no to the and what that can mean for you know, your own creative production, your own becoming, you know, because everybody in the film is really interested in only pursuing like what they want at that time, and to you know, invest in their own sort of artistic pursuits.
I like to think it's not in a hedonistic way. You know, it was much more of a artistic, intellectual, obsessive challenge. You know, in a humorous way. But I always said when people were like, "Oh, well, no one's doing anything," I said, "What are you talking about? That guy's writing guy's writing a book on JFK. They're clearly in band. You know, everyone's got their little thing. And that's how it felt. You know, in this era of my life. You know, like everyone I knew. You know, everyone had artistic pursuits and was working on something. You know. So that was the focus, you know. It's weird when like an anti-consumerist viewpoint is seen as political, you know, but it is when the culture is a consumer culture. To go against that, even philosophically, sets you as some kind of radical. You know,
well, I mean, you
it's
said
not that
like
radical, really.
All through history, somebody's enslaved, but what's the American version is like, I mean, you know, the contemporary American version is like you're sort of enslaved to the job. There's a great quote actually from a situationist. Raoul Vaneam says, as sure as work kills pleasure, pleasure kills work. If you're not resigned to dying of disgust, then you'll be happy enough to rid your life of the odious need to work, to give orders and to obey them, to lose and to win, and to keep up appearances and to judge and be judged.
Well, and also you have to be careful how you define work. You know, wage slavery is one thing, but like when this film came out, people were like suspicious of me, like, well, wait a second, you're not a slacker because you did something. You know, you made and I'm like, hey, you know, I'm just because it fit into for whatever reason it's in the marketplace, I guess. You can buy a ticket to a movie. I said, I don't really consider what I do work. I never have, and the day I do, I will not do it. You know, so I can honestly say the last job I've had was I worked at the Doubletree Hotel up in, you know, up 35 a little ways, you know, night bellman. But, you know, and I put in more hours a day than most people I know. You know, when you work 17 hours straight or 18 and 7-day weeks, you know, what it takes to do what you want to do. But I go, this is my life that I chose. I love it. I can't believe I get to do it. There's a way to really arrange your life where I think that was always the goal. And that's the goal of the situation. It's the goal of every generation, is that your life corresponds with your desires and you spend as much time as possible pursuing your own, you know, interests and path, whatever that shifting path might be, to have the freedom to even do it. And what they all know is that you can't quite get that in a certain kind of environment.
Bringing that sort of idea of like you can't define that. I mean, there's like not one set way of doing things. Is sort of like how I think about also like the work that I do with my artwork is sort of, I see this show in particular as like a painting show, and it's like these 3 different types of painting, but they're all sort of like not paintings too. They're sort of like trying to be like these other things, or sort of skirting their own like self as a painting. You know, it's like, oh, I'm going to be like this signage thing, or it's a bulletin board for like, you know, some upcoming event or something that
It's
happened.
questioning the medium and the way you receive it. Yeah,
Right,
love
right,
that.
yeah. And that sort of like got me thinking a lot about also like, besides that being like a refusal for like a singular way of reading the object, how an object could be like a slack object too, in a way that like it's, you know, say like the monochrome painting is something that, oh, I think I have some images of, oh, there's a situationist there.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there's a Baudelaire, the flâneur. Let me just, we'll get back to those sandwich board people. But this is like Malevich in the white square, and I kind of think, oh, this is a really like exemplifies like very, for me, a slacker type of painting, because it's like, oh, white on white. What kind of painting is that?
Yeah,
You know, like,
what the hell?
but it's so conceptually rich. It's pointing to the surface, it's pointing to the structure. It's impossibly ininterpretable, but also so interpretable.
Yeah.
Like what all the meanings are in that work. And all it is like a monochrome. You can project onto it, you know.
It absolutely demands that you think about the medium, what it means. Your mind has to go, you know, much bigger about what this even means. You know, like
Yeah.
the situation is Guy Debord making a movie that's really just black leader. You know, an audience comes in, the movie starts, and you might see a scratch, or it's just film going through a projector. And, you know, like, hey, when's the film start? It's like, no, this is the film.
This is the film.
And it's like,
It's so deep, you know. Like
it's like, okay, how many minutes is it? Oh, it's, you know, it's feature length.
yeah, we're talking about that other food.
And you're like,
What was that other one? Necrology.
you know, I love that kind of stuff.
You were saying
I love
earlier?
the structuralists.
Yeah, the structuralists,
in
yeah.
everything, just because they're not only is it, I always found it like wickedly humorous, but it's it really just kind of throttles you. You know, just demands you kind of, well, what is a film anyway? It's a
Exactly.
piece of leader going through a projector, you know, on that level. And then what is it? It's a canvas. You're watching. You're seeing
It's
it in a
genius.
museum. You know, it's like Duchamp with his urinal.
Exactly.
You know, it's like I love
whoa,
that kind
you
of stuff.
just
It's
blew
like,
my mind, you know.
it's like, don't tell me what high art is, you know, just receive, you know, like the film world I live in, we just hated like, oh, kind of the designer, Oscar winning type, important, big, beautiful, richly shot Oscar films. I still hate them, you
Yeah.
know, when I see the, I'm like, ugh, you know, like
Give me the
stuff like,
driest looking thing. I love it, you know.
you know, English Patient, or, you know, these kind of beautiful films. I'm like, oh God, you know, they're trying so hard. You know, it's just, I don't know. I like anything that just says,
Here it is.
yeah, it's not, don't tell me what beauty is, don't tell me what truth is, don't, you know.
Don't trick me with your illusions, you know.
You know, I think it's important to approach your medium, whatever it is, on a really extreme physical and intellectual level. Like find your boundaries early, push them to the max, you know, like friends of mine, you know, we would get these Super 8 cameras and like put them on the end of a fishing pole and cast them over and reel it up and see what the footage looked like. And, you know, you scratch on the film, you paint on the film, you know, like that's just fun, physical, tactile stuff. And I think any painter or sculptor, you know, you naturally do that. And then just kind of on a theoretical level, like what is a film?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, like what, you know, I mean, my idea for Slacker, I remember I was just driving and it's late at night and I was like, well, could you make a film that just went from one person to the next and didn't have a story? It just followed. You know, I was very interested in the way I wanted to represent. I mean, there's something just completely phony about like 3-act structure. I mean, it's how, you know, narrative, you know, it's something certainly to question how you receive stories. You know, like we're a storytelling animal, but what is the story? You know, how can you perceive it? What is it?
Yeah.
You know, for what ends and
Yeah.
you know,
What's the point to
yeah, is
a
it
lot of
theater,
yeah.
3-act? But I thought the cinema has a power that other forms don't have, and it was the immediacy of the time of it. So you could sort of, I was trying to represent, you know, how your mind or body drifts through a day. You know, how you inhabit space, how you go through your life, how your mind flows. And I know you're interested, you know, in that. A lot of that is, you know, just trying to represent
that space of like drifting and you know, everything sort of in the you know, the sort of structures of my work try to find all the in-betweens. You know, there's like the obvious things of like, oh, here are the objects, but then they create this space, you know, of like how you move through the space and then to find all the in-betweens, you know. And that's like, when I do these like film projects, I'm not a filmmaker by any means, but I love playing with the medium.
Clearly.
I love playing with painting. I'm not a painter either, but I'm really misusing all these, or I try to like use the form or misuse the form and like try to, you know, latch on to like what the medium can provide for me in finding how the camera drifts like the viewer would, or like the walking paths and things like that. And
you have all that movement. So many people just walking. In your film, then you realize the one she's on a treadmill.
Yeah, she's
you
stuck.
know, I love that. She's not going anywhere.
She's not going
anywhere. She's just walking like everybody else. You know,
yeah,
it's like,
exactly.
oh, that's brilliant.
Yeah, that's.
You know, one of my favorite filmmakers is actually Andy Warhol, because he approached it in a very painterly way. Like he really used the medium to not tell 3-act structure stories.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, just some of his more experimental works, really just highly conceptual.
Yeah.
I just think he's a brilliant filmmaker. Underrated, I think, because as a visual artist, he was so famous for that other stuff. But I just think he was a really great filmmaker.
Yeah, I agree. So dry, you know.
Yeah.
So dry, yet it's so riveting, you know. You're like,
a 3-hour film of, well, the famous 8 and 12-hour films of someone sleeping in the Empire State Building, which I've seen those, and it's the ultimate structural film. Like you say, oh, a plane went by in the background. Wow, you know, you just have to, the light's changing.
I thought about that a lot for this show, that if I take out also the active moments and it's just this empty space, it's like the time really sort of comes to a standstill almost, like you're really waiting for something to, like you feel like there might be something that should happen. And we were talking about, I think also earlier, like that other film, Necrology, was it?
Oh yeah,
How
a film from the 60s that I showed this film at Cinema Texas. It was probably about 10 years ago. They asked me to curate, and I tortured them and did all these structural films, like Michael Snow films, and I was like, okay, you asked me, so but this one entire film is some people on an escalator in New York, just going. He fixed the camera. It's one unmoving shot. And it's just people on their way to work or from work. You never really know, but they look kind of like, it's like being on an elevator. You have no personality. When you're on an elevator with other people, you know, everybody shuts down, and that kind of social space, all the human, you know, our social contract is just to kind of do nothing, you know. You don't say, hey, how you doing?
It's like the treadmill.
Yeah, you're just kind of, So he kind of captures that, people to and from work. It's just one shot, and that the punchline is, you get like 8 minutes of that, and you're like, you know, what the hell's this? You're looking at all these people. And then the film's over, and some music starts. Oh yeah, it has really grim kind of funeral type music. You know, it's like, ooh, how are these people on their way to the, you know, it's like, and then this really upbeat music starts, and you realize the credits are rolling. He's named everyone in the movie. You know, like a guy on his way to, you know, menstruating woman. You know, like he gave everyone a name and a thing, and you're like, oh God, he's really gonna do this. You get like another 8 minutes of credits, you know? So, but it's funny, you know, it's like, ooh, yeah. So I saw that a long time ago. You only need to see it once.
Yeah.
But it's like, I saw that a long time ago, but that's 16 minutes of my life, while a little grueling maybe compared to other things in your life, on one level, it's still with me, you know, all these years later. I'm like, that's a great idea, you know.
Well, there's a lot of like play in time in film, where you can shorten time by, or like you can lengthen time by like certain ways of editing, but when it's like straight one-on-one, like the structuralist would be like, let's not mess with this thing.
I know.
It's like all that you can read into that time.
Well, you have to accept it. I think your brain goes to some place of reality. You know, like the style that I was working on here, I like the idea of long uninterrupted takes, because at that moment, I think MTV style had so taken hold of quick cutting, everything covered, as if you didn't have the attention span to pay attention. You needed to be kind of, awakened and kept awake, and oh, this is exciting. Well, to the way that it cheapened imagery to so that none of it meant anything. If you see the way films are edited in the 40s, 50s, you see this just kind of incredible acceleration of cutting and how quick it is. So it's kind of a radical notion to let a scene play out, in a long shot now like that in itself is almost like a political statement. It's odd.
Yeah.
Technology now kind of it decreases the attention span maybe. Like as humans, I think as receivers of information, it's probably, you can just feel the attention span getting shorter and shorter. I think YouTube almost challenges cinema in general. I think like independent cinema is sort of an endangered species in a way in our culture, just because, you can kind of go down the rabbit hole of YouTube, and that's maybe a better way to spend 90 minutes than.
Yeah, there's a lot of artists and people now using that as their forum, but there's also so much else you have to navigate through to get maybe to that point.
Truly.
Somebody was telling me, it's like, yeah, but maybe this is like the contemporary way that you would, meander. Instead of literally meandering through space, you meander through the.
Yeah, the situationist notion of a derive, of a drift through a day, like what Slacker's definitely trying to do, what you're talking about, is but it's the physicality of the space.
Yeah.
Are we ready to give that up to this technological space that we navigate through? How's at the end of that experience, what do you have as a person?
Yeah.
I think it's intellectually super interesting if you're Wikipedia, if you're going in the right places. But it's information kind of coming at you, in a way.
Right.
Whereas if you're drifting through a day and maybe with a few friends, like-minded friends, and you're taking in the world, that's what the situationists were talking about, to take everyday things and reuse them and have that relation with your society. It's like boots on the ground out there. So, I think that's really important, no one would argue with that.
Yeah.
But the fact is, so many people are spending their time technically alone,
It's also like what,
on that.
It's sort of the farce of the internet being free, or like the internet provides us like a kind of freedom from things, or that.
Well, they sell all technologies as freedom. Choice has become freedom.
Yeah.
Freedom to choose this, that, or the other. They never question whether you should be there at all.
Yeah.
You should be exploring your freedom within this world.
Right, exactly.
This world that, what do you know? You can't get away from advertising in.
Exactly, you can't get it. And also they're selling our information. Now I'm going to become that conspiracy guy in this Slacker.
I don't think you can be that. I don't know. Conspiracy, reality, skeptical, cautious.
Yeah.
Like most technology, obviously it has this tremendous upside that we're all living in and enjoying. And then I think it's always good, like those old sci-fi movies from the 50s and stuff. There was always some technological problem that causes the mutant monster or whatever. It's always science gone the wrong way. I think technology sort of is that now, in a way. But maybe we're going to this phase where it's as a lot of people theorize, we're just sort of changing. There's some kind of.
We're evolving.
Yeah, like there's some post-human future for us that really is just.
Cyborg.
Where these,
Let's look at some more Slacker.
Are evolving.
Yeah. Here's another one. It's Yves Klein. This is Olivier Mosé. And these people, they were doing it for years. This is Agnes Martin. Super hardcore choice. You're like, I'm going to make the same thing, and I'm investigating this thing really specifically. And sort of reminds me of like that one other character, that philosopher guy in the film. What was his name? Louis.
Mackey?
Yeah.
The
Exactly.
The
yeah.
old anarchist, quote
the
unquote,
old
was talking
anarchist.
about.
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
you know he was clearly like sort of creating all this like history, his own narrative
Yeah.
of history like for his whole life, you know, and or like the conspiracy guy who was clearly like just gonna work on that for the rest of his life, you know, like pushing
Yeah.
that one idea through.
That one thing. I think I was really interested in obsession. You know, people who were obsessed with these singular ideas, or that it was a movie about obsession. I was obsessed with obsession. But you see it in artists, yeah, the same things. I like,
Yeah.
if you've been to the Rothko Chapel in Houston lately, I kind of love that place because it's this, or just any of Rothko's work, it's kind of, there's that same canvas, different colors, different, but not as extreme as of that, but.
This is Richard Tuttle, who actually explores, he really pushes the boundaries. This piece is actually called Drift, but I like that because it's like, you know, when he was making this stuff, people are like, those are so crappily made, like, and like, that's like shaped canvases that are badly stretched, you know, and then
Yeah,
he
yeah.
called it Drift, and I like that. Oh, no, this is a contemporary version of like kind of a Slack thing. This is a friend who's a painter. This is Joe Bradley, but he's also like constantly shifting like but he's the opposite of like say the white painting people,
Yeah.
like where it's constantly changing like from one thing to the other, but like seeing how far he can go to simplify.
Yeah, well,
He's doing it. He's doing a good job.
stick figure is pretty,
Simplified.
but he colored in the head.
Yeah, he colored in the head, so that was just back to there. But that might be the end of my slideshow. But
No, Lewis.
yeah,
Lewis Mackey, who was a philosophy teacher here for many years, kind of a beloved character.
yeah, I love his character too because he was sort of, everybody was sort of on the move, like slowly
Yeah.
at their own pace, but he seemed to like really take that mode of like, let's go for a walk.
Yeah,
you know,
let's
and-
go look at stuff.
Yeah.
The Texas Tower, the Texas legislature.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, he's just so excited to meet a kindred spirit. You know,
Yeah.
even if he is trying to rob him. You know,
Yeah, but
it's
that's
like-
almost like the best way for him to
Yeah.
have met him. Like
Like
I'm
he
robbing
takes
you.
that
Oh,
as a good
great,
sign.
thank you.
Yeah. Often the friends I made, like at the Film Society in the early days, like one of my best friends that always end up like living at our house or something, but the people I kind of caught sneaking into the movies and not paying. And I was like, oh.
Yeah,
At
those
first,
are
like,
your,
what are you doing? It's like, oh, then you find out they're totally, even though they're ripping you off, they're like in your
Cool.
same spirit. you
Yeah.
know?
I totally agree with you. Those are like all the people who are doing the, like that's like when I was in grad school too, it's like the people who sat in the corner with the brown paper bag with beers in it snickering while the teacher's talking. You're like,
Yeah.
oh, those are my people over there.
Yeah, yeah.
But this is the sort of like attitude that I'm really interested in, and also like in trying to go back to like, I keep going back to the show or like the way that I'm working, but trying to find that point of resistance and that point of refusal to, you know, go on that prescribed normative path, whether it becomes like this like metaphorical one where it's like a painting's not performing as a painting should,
Yeah.
or, you know, when I started doing these performance type things where I would like, you know, people got to really know me for doing these like things in the space of the gallery. And it then got misconstrued as more like this theatrical spectacle event.
Like, yeah.
And so then I started saying like, no, it's not about that. It's really in service of the sculptures. It's a demonstration of like the refusal of a certain identity for the work. And then also it's a place for me to produce something else. So it's kind of like masking all the ways of like doing some performative thing but it's
Yeah.
in service of me making a video later
In a space, yeah.
or a record or whatever.
Right.
So it was never like, come to see the band in the space, you know. It was always, I'm doing this thing, but it doesn't have anything to do with like a theatricalized event.
Right.
And that's sort of like also the way that I wanted to link up with your film or like your practice, and thinking of how you meet those points of resistance, you know, like doing your own thing, you know, like it's sort of creating a space for yourself without like the work being able to do something other than the expectations of what it's supposed to do.
Right. Yeah. Well, that's an interesting, what is the expectations of your medium
Yeah.
to begin with, and then what are your expectations of a particular work, and I like works that clearly don't care if you consume them or not, like they exist on their own for their, they're just there, and if you wander in and can appreciate them for what they are, then, you win. But they're not gonna like reach out to you too far and beg you to like them.
Yeah.
Like that's kind of I sort of like that, in a medium like film that's trying to be liked so much,
Sometimes not,
especially
though.
at this point in my life. Yeah, it's really great when you see a film like by Gaspar Noé or that French filmmaker, or Belgian, I think. When you see a film that really is just like,
Yeah.
you gotta love that. But I make a lot of comedies, so I'm not saying
love
I'm saying I'm not. I like that was a little strange, but I like
But I
having
could see it in your
having a fun relation with the audience. I mean, Slacker goes both ways because it's sort of a film that's at once alienating, but I had made other films that were 100% alienating. But to make a film that's somewhat alienating, but then at the other hand is conscious of itself sort of as an entertainment, as a film, i.e. it's only 97 minutes. It's not 3 hours long. It doesn't force you that far. Whatever genre you're in, for me as a filmmaker, I'm making a rock and roll movie, or I'm making a teenage movie, or whatever genre, like what are the rules of that genre, and how can you,
Tweak them or.
yeah, how do you respond to that, or everything that's come before it, or what's at that time considered, like again, we come back to the Duchamp's, urinal or something like, you look at the Mona Lisa, just put a mustache on it. It's just like, what can you do? It's like, that's why I like the Situationists so much. They would take an advertisement, this billboard that's being shoved in your face, and then use it to kind of subvert, to create a new meaning with pre-existing materials.
Right.
The stuff of our culture that's out there in your face, to just, the art of dissent and how you can kind of subvert that. That's always interesting to me, the audience.
Yeah.
Artists who are, I don't know if you know, like Ron English and these painters who, he paints a beautiful picture of Ronald McDonald, but he looks like he weighs about 290 pounds. He's just supremely overweight. But it's commercially viable. I mean, it's perfectly done. And yet he's really fat and unappealing, like his body. It's like, wow,
That's a good painting.
But he has the craftsmanship to like deliver the commercial level. And
the technique is
impeccable. Spot on, and that's the point. Let me read this thing from Robert Louis Stevenson, because I brought it up here. Stevenson, this is old. This is up there with Thoreau. And
it's in here too.
Yeah, it was a cover. It was the beginning of that, but I wanted to read. So to talk about just what we were talking about, how this is nothing new, but the way this is written. Idleness so-called, which does not consist in doing nothing, but in doing a great deal not recognized in the dogmatic formularities of the ruling class, has as good a right to state its position as industry itself. This is so 19th century written, but it is admitted that the presence of people who refuse to enter in the great handicap race for sixpenny pieces is at once an insult and a disenchantment for those who do. That says everything, because the judgment you get when you're occupying this space is you have to be ready to take it on, because it's what is it? It's tinged with jealousy.
Yeah.
People don't like freedom. If you watch, Easy Rider, remember Nicholson around the campfire gives that talk about freedom if they really find, and they all get killed, right? So, because they're free. The man kills them, So that's the age-old struggle. But you're usually on the right track if you're tweaking out everyone around you with your lifestyle. I took that as a good sign when everyone in my family was worried about me. And,
what are you
and
doing?
everyone was, I knew I was on the right path. Or you listen to advice from everyone and just like, okay, I'll do the opposite of what the consensus, the mediocre consensus of what, because no one knows you. I mean, they're going to give you lame, even the people who purport to love you, it's always safe. Everyone just wants everybody to be safe and taken care of and also not a burden on anyone else, particularly them.
Yeah.
So, the advice you'll always get is kind of a medium down the road, middle.
Yeah.
And if you listen to it and do it, well, you get the life you get that life, you really have to. But you gotta suffer what he's talking about here, the slings and arrows of being that person. People hated Thoreau, or just saw him as a crank and as an eccentric. But he was this wonderful guy, not only a great writer, but just a great human, They never appreciated him.
Yeah,
Some
that's what
did,
they say
but-
about us artists, though. Like, what do you guys do all the time? We're thinking about stuff,
Well, the word flâneur you used earlier, and I wasn't familiar with that term, in Old French, but I heard it from a good friend of mine, Speed Levitch. I don't know if any of you know his work, but I heard it, we were in a conversation, and he used that, and then I got an email from you, and there was that term, and I got really interested in it. But it was, he describes it as people whose job it is to appreciate. People who go through, they don't do anything, but they stop to acknowledge
Observe
and appreciate what is around us. That's kind of saying everyone else is so busy with their agenda that they don't stop and go, geez, that's beautiful. Look where we're living. We're alive. You need people in our culture to say that.
Yeah.
To pull you back from your immediate day's agenda of, I got to do this, here's my schedule, I got to do that, dinner at 6:30, and whatever routines we all fall into. You really need someone in your midst to be able to, and I think society needs it, for someone to just
Point it out
stop
there.
and see things in a different way. That's the struggle, I think, to be conscious.
Yeah, exactly.
So you got to appreciate those who are, commenting and seeing things.
Using the subject of refusal as a point of departure in the work, but also knowing that there are certain expectations that need to be fulfilled and others that I can push against, expectations for a certain kind of, and I remember when I was back in school, and Vito Acconci, this amazing conceptual artist that I saw him speak, and he was like, well, I could never do that again. Seedbed is a one-time performance. It's a seminal piece, seminal, but it was a very important piece, but he could never do it again, because it loses its once you know what's going to happen, it's sort of kind of not really interesting anymore. You can only have it as this anecdote. It's sort of like the structuralist film thing. It's you don't really have to see it again, but you see that and you get that surprise, or you understand it. And for me, it's sort of I think of it as both a metaphorical way of working, but not necessarily you're saying, not like an anarchist punk all the time, but sort of always taking into consideration different contexts. You try to push against those, boundaries as much as you can without being.
And it might be different next year than it is this year.
Yeah.
Your cards that you're holding change at all times.
Yeah.
It's a little weird for me, to have to talk about Slacker just recently. I haven't seen this film in so long, or consciously thought about it, but having to sit here and then that remake, they asked me if I wanted to be involved, and I was like, no, I didn't want to. I'll go watch it with everybody else, but I didn't want to. It's that's another phase of my life,
Yeah.
And I saw it as someone else do something. I was much more interested. You can't even if something's kind of fundamental to your thinking and who you are, and you never can get that far away from it, for better or worse, it's still maybe you can't live in it. You can't, let's hope you evolve over the years,
I kind of thought I would close it with a quote, but
Perfect. We've had a lot of quotes.
we had a lot of
Let's
quotes. I'm kind of
go
into
with
the
the quote
quotes because
thing.
it's an easy way to get an idea across.
If I would have thought about it, there's a lot of quotes. I
There's
should
a lot-
have
Actually,
brought
this
my
whole
book
thing
of
is
quotes.
like all quotes, basically. But this one I thought was like, oh, this will be the concluding quote because it just seemed to sort of nicely.
Does it still apply?
It still
think it
applies. It still applies, even though we got into like the internet and things like that. But
Yeah.
okay, between the street and the seat, the recording and the projection, the actor and the viewer, the soundtrack in the bedroom, the museum and the graveyard, play and rewind, original and copy, doing and not doing, countless potential sites of production and interruption remain to be discovered. To disperse cinema in this way is to create and multiply cinematic possibilities both on and off the screen, where the finished product normally appears. That's by John Kelsey in an essay about moving images.
Wow, that's great.
Anyway, well, thanks for coming.
Yeah,
and
thanks.
thank you
Good
so
hanging
much,
out.
Rick,
So-
for this
Well,
great
congratulations. Go check out Mika's show.